Hey guys, I hope that you had a great weekend and I hope that you're ready for the last week of distance learning. It's just so crazy that we've come this far. It's already been 5 weeks and we're on week number 6 of doing distant learning, of reading our story and continuing learning while we're at home. Today we're going to continue with the Land of Stories, the Wishing Spell. And last time we read chapter 16, and at the very end of the chapter, Alex and Connor were running, and they were running from the big bad wolf pack. They were about to get them when they came to a ledge that they jumped off of into the ocean. And the wolves looked over the ocean and they couldn't see them anywhere, so they had escaped. So now chapter 17, I think we're going to find out what's happened to the twins. And hopefully the wolves won't catch up with them. Chapter 17 is called Goldilocks, Wanted Dead or Alive. I don't remember if you remember about last time we read about Goldilocks, but we read about how Jack, the one who owns the beanstalk, was in love with her, but she's a fugitive, means that she's wanted for a crime. And so we're going to read chapter 17. It's a shorter chapter today, but it'll get us ready for the next chapter tomorrow. All right. Chapter 17, Goldilocks Wanted, Dead or Alive. It was just before sundown, and soldiers from the Corner Kingdom were hot on Goldilocks' trail. She had been spotted on the outskirts of Baker's village in the early afternoon, and had been on the run ever since. A group of 20 men were right behind her on their horses, determined to take her into custody by any means necessary. Lucky for her, Goldilocks had the fastest horse in all the kingdoms. Do you remember what her horse's name is? Come on, Porridge, Goldilocks said to her horse. You can make it, girl. We're almost to the border. They passed Rapunzel's tower and crossed into the dwarf forest, but the soldiers kept chasing her. In doing so, they were breaking laws that the Happily Ever After Assembly had enacted. But then again, Goldilocks had broken so many laws, she had lost count, so she doubted the soldiers would experience any repercussions for it. Repercussions are like when you do something and there's a consequence for them. Porridge had an advantage over the other horses since she knew the dwarf forest by heart. She and Goldilocks gained a lot of ground from knowing what was behind every tree and which paths led where. Split up and find her, Goldilocks heard one of the soldiers order from behind her. Goldilocks could feel her horse getting tired. They had been running for hours, and she knew Porridge needed a break soon if they were going to stay on the run any longer. They came across an abandoned barn that was partially hidden by trees. Goldilocks had often used this place to hide from anyone hot on her trail. Porridge, I'm going to hide in here and wait it out, Goldilocks told her loyal horse. Find someplace safe and rest. Meet me back here tomorrow at sunrise. Porridge nodded and galloped away. Goldilocks withdrew her sword and approached the barn. The door was off its hinges. It looked like someone or something had forced its way in recently. The inside of the barn was a disaster. Stacks of hay were knocked over, stables were broken down into nothing but bits of broken wood, and there was blood stains on the floor and walls. But thankfully, whatever had caused this damage wasn't here anymore. Goldilocks put away her sword. She wasn't intimidated by the barn in the slightest. She had seen much worse and had been through much worse and had caused much worse in her days on the run. She took off her long coat and her sword and began unlacing her tall boots, getting ready to settle in for the night. Something colorful caught her eye while she was doing so. A bright blue fabric was sticking out of the bottom of a stack of hay. Goldilocks pulled it from under the haystack and examined it. It was a beautiful, bright blue gown with delicate stitching. It reminded Goldilocks of a dress she had owned when she was a girl. It had been so long since the last time she'd worn a dress. She discovered a mirror hanging on the barn as well. It was slightly tilted and had cracks on the bottom half, but she could still see her reflection perfectly. She didn't like what she saw. Goldilocks was young, but she had aged so much since the last time she had seen her reflection, and so clearly. She was a full-grown woman now. Goldilocks undressed and put on the blue dress. She let her hair down and ruffled it up a bit. She wiped off all the dirt on her face with a handkerchief and looked in the mirror again. She stared at herself, completely awestruck. She had forgotten how beautiful she could be. She only wished Jack could see her looking like this. Such beauty, such a waste, said a voice. In the blink of an eye, Goldilocks had retrieved her sword and extended it in front of her. "Who's there?" Goldilocks demanded, but she didn't see anyone in the barn. If only the world could see what I see now. Goldilocks, a woman feared throughout all the kingdom, standing vulnerably in a dress, said the voice. "Don't be a coward, show yourself," Goldilocks said. She turned back to the mirror, but didn't see her reflection. Another woman with a pale face and a dark hooded cloak was staring back at her. "Hello, Goldilocks," said the woman in the mirror. "You," Goldilocks said. There was only one woman in the world who could possibly have the ability to communicate from mirror to mirror. "I know you. You're the queen everyone's looking for." "Yes," the evil queen said. "We're both women on the run." "What do you want with me?" Goldilocks said. "Why do you assume I need something from you?" the evil queen said. "I've appeared to you simply to pass along some information I've recently acquired." "Nice try, but I'm not some ditzy maiden you can con," said Goldilocks, getting closer to the mirror. "Try giving me a poisoned apple and I'll shove it down your throat." "No, of course not," the evil queen said in a mocking tone. "You're just poor little Goldilocks, a girl who was tricked into thinking she was going on a date with the boy she loved, and has been running from the law ever since." Goldilocks stepped away from the mirror. "How do you know that?" she asked with intensity in her eyes. "I know more about you than anyone," the evil queen said. "I know that when you were a young girl, you received a handwritten letter from a young boy you loved named Jack. He asked you to meet him at a house a little way out of town and gave instructions on how to get there. You went to the house and waited for hours, but he never showed up." "How do you know all this?" Goldilocks asked. "You became sleepy in that house, didn't you?" the evil queen continued. "So you decided to go to sleep in one of the beds and hope you'd wake up to find him. But you didn't wake to him, did you? You awoke to find 3 bears staring down at you, and they almost killed you. You barely escaped the house alive, but the bears pressed charges against you anyway for breaking into their home. And being young and scared, you ran. You ran and have been running ever since. For years, you wondered how Jack could have done that to you. How could he have framed you like that? And then finally, one night you snuck into Red Riding Hood Kingdom and asked him. But Jack told you he'd grown up poor and illiterate. He hadn't sent you the letter because he had never learned to write. Someone else did. Someone else framed you. Jack had been looking for you for years. He was devastated when you disappeared. He even climbed a beanstalk looking for you. You two have been meeting covertly in the shadows for almost a decade now. Who told you that? Goldilocks asked. Every driven person comes from a mountain of pain they wish to keep hidden, the evil queen said. I did my research on you, Goldilocks, and you and I aren't so different, except I know who wrote that letter. Goldilocks shook her head in disbelief. How could she know something Goldilocks had been trying to discover her entire life? And who might that be? She said. Red Riding Hood, of course, the evil queen said. What? Goldilocks said. She almost stopped breathing. It's true, the evil queen said. The young queen has a large mirror in her bedroom and talks in her sleep. You'd be appalled by the things she confesses in her nightmares. Goldilocks had to sit down. She didn't even feel human anymore. She felt like an entity made of pure anger. Remember, Red Riding Hood had a huge crush on Jack. You remember that? So it all makes sense. Red Riding Hood has always loved Jack, and you were standing in the way, the evil queen said. She was young when she wrote the letter. She had no idea what the consequences would be. She thought you would leave heartbroken before the bears got home, and then Jack would be hers. But she had years and years worth of opportunities to make things right, Goldilocks said. Her eyes were staring down at the ground, but she was blind with rage. She stood up, threw off the blue gown, and redressed in her own clothes, sword and all. What will you do now that you know the truth? The evil queen asked. I'm going to take Red on a trip, Goldilocks said, and she is not coming back. There's only one place she can disappear forever, the queen said, and her reflection faded from the mirror. Wonder what this one place is. Goldilocks burst out of the barn and ran into the night, whistling for her horse. She was about to do exactly what the evil queen wanted, but more important, she was about to get her long overdue revenge. And that's the end of chapter 17. I told you it was kind of short, but that was just such a crazy chapter. Don't forget that in the description, I'm going to post a couple of activities, a couple of questions for you to answer about the chapter so that we can get ready for our next chapter tomorrow, which is chapter 18, The Mermaid's Message. We're finally going to get to meet some mermaids, so I'm pretty excited about that. Anyway, I hope you have a great evening, and I hope to see you tomorrow with our next chapter. Bye, guys.